Welcome to CEO Interviews, a production of Agoracom, in which we take the time to speak with small cap executives about what's going on at their companies. And there's a lot going on at Peak Fintech. We've got Johnson Joseph on. He's the CEO. The company trades on the CSE under the stock symbol PKK. And for our friends in the US on the OTCQX under PKKFF. But this is probably going to be the last interview we do if all things go well with those stock symbols and those stock exchanges. For those of you new to the story, here's how you understand Peak Fintech, and you got to understand them because they're hitting big numbers and they're going to the NASDAQ. How do you connect over 100 million small businesses in China who need access to credit with over 10,000 banks and lending institutions that all have their own unique lending criteria? Answer is, it's not simple. It's a major problem, and it leads to great inefficiencies between companies and looking for lenders, lenders looking for companies. And usually it's driven by regional and local relationships. Well, Peak Fintech uses an AI-powered platform to automate the entire process, making the Chinese commercial lending system more efficient for small business lenders who can now go beyond those local regional relationships to connect with bankers anywhere and lenders anywhere in the country. This saves significant time in the process for both sides and lets lenders increase their volumes, simultaneously reducing their risk. Now, sounds like a lot of talk, more than just lip service. The company's helped facilitate over $2.2 billion worth of transactions since 2018. Recently closed an oversubscribed private placement, 52.6 mil. Revenue for 2020 was 42.7 million, but revenue for Q1 is 14.2, up 260%. But the big thing is the guidance. By 2023, the company expects to be doing $625 million in revenue with really healthy EBITDA and a really healthy net income number. Johnson, welcome back.
Thanks, George. It's been a while. It's been too long. Very happy to be here.
Hey, we've been trying to get you, but you're too busy, growing a company that's busting revenue, setting record revenues, and get uplisted to the NASDAQ. And by the way, an oversubscribed financing of over $50 million. So we can't blame you. But glad to have you. Before we get into some of the details, I want to talk to you about some of the things. How good are you feeling about Peak Fintech today and how it's positioned in terms of the operating side and the capital market side?
George, we couldn't be in a better place. I mean, you just mentioned the financing that we just closed. That was the catalyst to a lot of things for us. Now, I know that our investors and the market had been waiting for a while for us to put out our guidance. But when we announced the financing that we wanted to do originally back in March, we said we wanted to do $15 million, right? So $15 million was going to take us, to a certain level. We'd get a little bit down the road or whatever, and maybe we'd have to do another financing down the line. But listen, when the news came out and, phones started ringing, emails, all these messages started to come in, and we had between 20 and 25 million, and requests from existing investors on the president's list. We're like, whoa, wait a minute here. Let's revisit this whole 15 million thing. And then one thing led to another. We spoke to Research Capital. They also had orders. So we're like, okay, you know what? We can't do just 15 millions. We kept increasing. We went to 25, 30, 40, and finally we stopped it at 50 million. But we probably could have done more, but we wanted to make sure that we didn't dilute the company too much at the market cap that it had at the time, right? So we said, okay, we'll stop at 50. But what that did was it opened so many other opportunities for us in terms of growth, accelerated growth. So that's why it took us a little bit longer to come out with our guidance, but eventually we came out with the numbers, and that's what they are.
Look, I don't think anyone's going to complain. If you took longer to close an oversubscribed financing, 3.5 times oversubscribed, which is unbelievable. And you could add more. You just chose to stop there. What does that say about the appetite and the validation in terms of capital markets for Peak Fintech and how the big investors are looking at your business model?
Yeah, you know what? You mentioned off the top, George, that we're forecasting over 600 million in revenue 3 years from now. obviously the company's got a lot of room to grow, right? So we're just talking like, and by the way, the numbers that we put out with our forecast, that's just the Chinese market, right? Because right now we currently operate exclusively in China, and it's well known that we have plans to come to North America eventually, hopefully by the end of this year, and eventually other markets, Europe or whatever, right? So you're looking at a business model that has tremendous growth potential, right? So we just did a $50 million raise, but what our investors need to understand is that when you have a company with such potential, global potential, once you get institutional investors involved and they understand where you're going, what your business plan is, then you could be looking at, doing raises in the future in the triple digits, hundreds of millions of dollars. But then you're talking about not just revenue, and you're not just talking about 600 million in revenue, but you could be talking like with the B's, like $1 billion of revenue. That's the kind of potential that this company has. I know right now, the people that have followed Peak for years, right? Like, I mean, we're a penny stock company on the CSE, trading at 2.5 cents or whatever, barely generating any revenue, market cap of $5 to $10 million. And now all of a sudden, fast forward a couple of years later, and here's a CEO talking about $1 billion potential revenue, that kind of stuff. But that's what the business model is. I mean, in terms of, I've gotten a lot of questions in terms of how confident am I with, the forecast that we put out, 100 million this year. It's a big jump still from 40 million last year, 42 million, whatever, 2020. We're talking about going to 100 million this year. It's a big jump. How confident?
And 305 million next year, which is even bigger jump. That's almost
exactly right. So people are like, okay, well, how confident? How can we really believe this? I think what's important for people to understand is that, yes, when we came out with the Lending Hub concept, we're targeting small micro businesses, and they may need $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 from time to time. And that's how we thought, we were going to grow our business. They need to replenish their inventory, or they need to grow their business. They need, to, make renovations or whatever, right? But what's happening right now is that signing deals with companies like Tsingshan, the steel company. This is something that we announced, I think, back in December, right? So these are huge companies. Tsingshan, COFCO is, they're the largest food processing company in all of China, probably in all of Asia, and most likely in. And
that's saying something.
They're one of the biggest
food processor in Canada. It's another one to be the biggest food processor in China.
Let's say they're one of the biggest in all of the world, George. Yeah. Right? So we're dealing right now with distributors who work directly with those companies, and what's happening is that those distributors, right, they buy from COFCO on a regular basis. I mean, they've been doing business with COFCO for years, right? So there's history. So we can go. They're now clients of the Lending Hub, right? So we've been doing a lot of business with these distributors. And listen, rice, oil, anything that is consumed in China, really, most of the food that is consumed in China is somehow linked with COFCO, right? So we're dealing with distributors that essentially feed China, right? So they're buying stuff all the time, George, right? So they need cash, right? So they have cash flow issues, and what we're doing is we're helping solve their cash flow problems. So when we go to these clients and we say, okay, you know what, show us your numbers. Okay, this is how much you did last year, 2 years ago. What are you forecasting next year, and how much do you think you're going to need from us, from our services, whatever. This is why we can confidently predict. We look at the numbers and the forecast, and we say, well, what if these clients are doing so much, this is how much they're going to need from us. It's very easy for us to forecast our numbers and to have confidence in our numbers, because they're not based on just future expectations. They're based on history of our clients.
And these are massive vendors who have been dealing with George Com for the last 30 years. They know their business, they know their ranges, they know their volumes, and can easily, I mean, you're solving a major problem, because you're allowing the vendor to say, hey, I've known George Com for 28 years. They're a solid business. They do $3.2 million in business with us a year, and there are thousands of companies like that. So you're allowing them just to make those relationships even better.
Right.
There's no doubt that you've got a real solid basis for these for this financial guidance. This isn't just you pulling numbers out of a hat and saying,
Absolutely, yeah.
double, triple, double. Yeah, that sounds good. Let's slap it on a piece of paper. I think you've actually underpromised. My gut is you've underpromised so you can overperform on this.
You know what? I think George, that this, I believe that this is what the market is thinking. Like, I mean, we're pulling numbers out of thin air and stuff like that. But if you go back to the history of the company, like, you know, since we switched to this business model, 2019, 2018, 2019, 2020, we've always made our numbers, and we will continue to make our. We know exactly where we're going. I mean,
look, your Q1 was a 260% gain over Q1 last year. Yeah, and that's $14 million. That's not 260% growth on 50,000.
Right.
The $14 million plus, that's 260% growth. That's incredibly difficult too. As a founder, as a business guy, that's not an easy thing to do when you're talking at the millions. So seeing that growth going forward, no, I don't see that as numbers being pulled out of. Question for you: how much that do you think is it too early to know? How much is that going to come from organic growth versus M&A potentially? Or, you know, what does that look like?
You know what? Most of it will come from organic growth, believe it or not. But there are going to be some strategic acquisitions sprinkled here and there. There are going to be announcements. There should be announcements coming up in the next, I would say, 2 to 3 months. More strategic, but also acquisition that will bring clients and new revenue streams to the company as well.
How powerful? I mean, there's no way for us to assess it, us, the investors at home. There's no way to assess the platform other than to see major partnerships and transactions and revenue going through the platform. But when you keep, you know, when you say things like next 2-3 months, you expect to see even more announcements. Or is there anybody in the world that doesn't know about the Peak Fintech lending platform and doesn't want to potentially do business with you?
Well, you know what? In China right now, we're starting to, as you know, we're starting to make a name for ourselves, right? You know, some of the announcements that we made. I mean, talking to companies like UnionPay. Well, not directly with UnionPay, but a subsidiary of UnionPay. So obviously, they're aware of us as well. So more and more now, we're getting to be known in China. So there is potential. There's a lot of potential for growth in China, but we're also looking at coming to North America, right? Like, I mean, expanding our services. We can talk a little bit about that later, but initially, yes, you know, we're an unknown company, right? So who are you guys and what do you do? Can I trust you? We're slowly gaining the trust of people, and some of the partnerships that we've made over the past couple of months have certainly made things easier for us. So yes, more and more people are willing to do business with us in China.
And my personal experience has proven to me with other small caps, clients of Agoracom that have gone to the NASDAQ, that going to the NASDAQ, unbelievable. Like the most recent one, and our good friend Sheldon Inwintosh is invested in that company as well, is an esports company last year that went onto the NASDAQ. And it's amazing how their biz dev just blew up literally the day after they list on the NASDAQ, because it just provides big customers. Again, now George, going back to GeorgeCom, you know, GeorgeCom may have wanted to do business with Peak Fintech, but you're right, it says, hey, I'm not sure. They're in Canada, they're on the small stock exchange. Sounds like a great company. Not sure if I want to do business with them though. They hear you on the NASDAQ and it just eliminates all of that, and you start getting phone calls. Do you get the feeling that the NASDAQ listing is going to help not just the capital market side, but the biz dev side as well, because you have that attached to your name?
Absolutely, George. That's an excellent point that you bring. You know, most of the people will focus on capital markets, NASDAQ, you get that visibility. But yes, you're absolutely right. Listen, the Canadian Securities Exchange has been great for us, and sure. I love those guys. You know, they truly are the exchange for the entrepreneurs. You know, I have nothing but great things to say about them. But unfortunately, in China, nobody knows what the Canadian Securities Exchange is, and I don't even believe that they can access the website from China. But everybody knows NASDAQ, right? So when you basically go and for business development purposes, right? You know, so they want to know who you are. You're trying to make a deal. You tell them about your services, your company, and everything else. And obviously, they dig into the company. But when you tell them, hey, you know what? We are an international company. We're listed on the NASDAQ stock exchange, boom, that resonates with people,
Yeah,
so
because you can lose your job by doing business with the wrong company. If I'm
right.
if I work for a China Union Pay or some big company, say I don't know who Peak Fintech is. I don't want to take a chance because if we have a problem, I'm going to lose my job. Now you don't lose your job when you do a deal with a NASDAQ company because
No,
you can look at your boss
you
and
get
say, "Hey, boss,
promoted.
on the NASDAQ, they're fully funded," and that eliminates all that risk.
No, it does. Like, I mean, that will definitely benefit us from a business development standpoint, even in China. Getting on the NASDAQ is going to open a lot of doors for us, definitely.
So let's talk about that. What do the remaining steps look like? I know you can't give us precise, maybe a lot of people want to say, give me the date, but it's not up to you because the SEC is involved, the NASDAQ's involved, lawyers, I've been through it. So what do the remaining steps ballpark, if you can give everyone generalization of the remaining steps and maybe a general ETA of when you think you'll be uplisted?
Sure, absolutely. Listen, one of the most important things, well, essentially the last box to check off was the minimum stock price. And our consolidation happened yesterday. There was a bit of a glitch, unfortunately, like when the stock didn't trade yesterday, but it traded today and it needed to trade at $4 US or above. And I believe today, I think we closed at, I don't know, I don't look at the stock price, but I think we closed at $4.10 or something like that, 410.
Yeah, I didn't look at it either. My
US.
apologies.
But on the important thing was on the US side. I think we closed at 410 or something like that, or 415 US. But the important thing is that we closed above $4 US. That was the last thing remaining for us. Now we can complete our application. What our lawyers are doing right now is they're requesting the final reports from Broadridge in terms of number of shares and that kind of stuff. So once we get that report, we expect to get it either before the end of this week or early next week. Once we have that report, then our lawyers are going to be able to finalize our Form 40F, which they will submit to the NASDAQ along with telling the NASDAQ that we've met the minimum stock price requirement. So the NASDAQ will complete the review. I think it's going to take, hopefully, if they're not too busy, we're looking at 2 to 3 days for them to complete their review. So just working backwards. If we get the Broadridge report early next week, it takes our lawyers 2 or 3 days to finalize the Form 40F, complete everything. They submit that to the NASDAQ. It takes them another 2 to 3 days. So that puts us the following week. The NASDAQ will then issue a letter to the Securities and Exchange Commission saying that, hey, you know what, we've approved Peak for listing. And then the SEC will just kind of like, I don't want to say rubber stamp, sign off, but through the MJDS process, through the I forget the exact term, but
yeah, don't worry about the exact term, but they talk to each other.
Exactly. Once the NASDAQ basically issues that letter, and my understanding it's just like a one-page letter. Once they issue that letter to the Securities and Exchange Commission, then it's just a matter of determining what day you begin trading. So realistically, we're looking at probably 2, maybe 3 weeks, I would say, before we begin trading.
All right, that's a little quicker than I thought. I thought maybe with going to the first week of August next week, maybe we'd be somewhere around the end of August, first couple of weeks of September. But if you could do it faster,
I definitely think it will be before the end of August.
All right, so we're gonna be back on again with a brand new background, brand new stock symbols. Hey,
Looking
by the way,
forward
once you're listed there, what kind of investor marketing do you guys have? Some investor marketing plans laid out, because obviously you want to start attracting U.S. investors who otherwise aren't able to invest in you today on the CSE. And are you guys getting any kind of early feedback? Sometimes you do, because I know some companies have gotten phone calls saying, hey, let us know when you're on because we like your business and we want to start accumulating position in your company.
Yeah, we have gotten some early feedback. I mean, we're working with the bank. I don't want to say the cat's out of the bag, but I wasn't aware, but it was fully disclosed in our prospectus that we are working on the U.S. side with the benchmark company. So we're also working with the MZ Group, which is a very good investor relations firm out of the U.S. Yeah, so these guys are going to be taking care of all of our investor relations, marketing, planning, that kind of stuff. So between the benchmark group and what we're doing with MZ Group, we have also a full-time director of marketing and communications, Barry Ellison, who's been working. He's been fantastic. He's working with our folks at CHF Capital Markets with the MZ Group. So I'm letting them handle all that stuff, but things are in the works.
And by the way, I forgot to say this earlier. Yeah, we've been talking to CHF. We've been talking to Barry. I'm also an investor in the private placement. I want to make sure that's kind of full disclosure for everybody. So
Good for you, George.
I forgot to mention that earlier, and I just want to make sure I mention that at the same time. Playing devil's advocate for a second, because not everything is always 100%. There's no business that has everything smooth going on. There have been some recent Chinese regulations that have been affecting tech companies. We know that there's been an impact on Alibaba. There's some concern that Apple may have some issues over there. Is that something in any way, shape, or form that could impact Peak? And is that something that shareholders should be, I don't want to say worried about, is that something that should be, they should be cognizant of?
Yeah, those are very, very good points. We are a company operating right now exclusively in China, but there's a big distinction, obviously, between us and some of the companies and the regulations that are affecting those companies. The number one thing I want to point out is the fact that we are not a Chinese company. That's number one, right? So those companies that are I don't want to say their U.S. listings are being threatened right now, but some investors are very nervous, in terms of, I don't want to say Alibaba is going to lose their U.S. listing or anything like that, but it's becoming increasingly difficult for tech companies to list on U.S. exchanges, right? So
Chinese tech companies.
Chinese tech companies,
yeah,
right?
So this is impacting companies that are domiciled in China.
Exactly. If they are domiciled in China, then their principal regulators are Chinese, right? So it's those regulators that tell them what they can and cannot. That's not the case for Peak. The principal regulators of Peak are the Quebec regulators, right? So they're the ones that just approved their prospectus offering. So that's the number one distinction. So we're not impacted by the regulators in China. The second thing is what the government is doing in China is they're looking to protect the personal information of their private citizens. A lot of those companies, they have apps, they have all these things, and they collect information on the consumers without necessarily their knowledge, right? And what they do with that information, that's what the government is looking into right now. So we are not a consumer platform. We do not deal with consumers. We're a B2B platform. We deal strictly with businesses. And so we don't have to worry about that. Now, the other thing that the government is trying to prevent on the lending side is that credit has been too easily available to consumers with all of these platforms. There were P2P platforms, and a lot of consumers were getting in over their heads, drowning in debt, and it was leading to some really tragic situations, right? So the government had to step in. There was no regulations. People were borrowing money at 20, 25% interest rates. It was crazy, George, and they couldn't pay it back. And they were basically, again, I don't want to get into the details, but the government needed to step in. So the government did step in. So I can't fault the government at all for what they're doing. I think they're doing the same thing, but none of these things impact us because, again, we're not a consumer platform. We don't collect personal information. We're B2B, and we're helping businesses, right? So the government also realizes, George, that businesses, small businesses particularly, are the backbone of the economy, right? So they recognize what we're doing. Listen, there is no way the relationship that we have with Rongbang, which is owned by China UnionPay, which is a state-owned entity. So obviously the government is aware of us. They have looked into our operations. They know what we're doing. And instead of trying to prevent us or whatever, making things difficult for us, they're actually cooperating with us, So
trying to facilitate you guys getting bigger.
Exactly. They're working with us, and we're working with them. So the issues right now that are impacting those tech companies do not impact us at all.
All right. Well, I'm really glad you had a chance to clear that up because there is some misconception around that. Want to take that right off. Just want to take that right off the table. Let's talk about growth really quickly for the last few minutes here. Two kinds of growth. One is going to be organic into North America via North America expansion, and the other one's going to be M&A. Which one do you want to talk about first? You want to talk organic into North America or some M&A with Jean K and Kubler?
Well, they kind of like merge or blur into the same thing, okay, right? Because M&A, yes, Kubler, the Kubler transaction, I know, has been on the minds of a lot of our investors and the market itself. People want to know what's going on. All I'm going to say is that we've made a lot of progress. for the transaction. We have a framework right now. We had a very good working session at the board level at Peak, discussing the deal itself, some of the terms of a potential deal. So the Kubler directors are also aware of what's going on. We're very, very close, George, from making an announcement that we have reached something between Peak and Kubler. So I would expect an announcement to be made more than likely before the end of August. I would expect an official announcement to be made.
That'll be great
for that transaction. Now, once that is done, obviously that's what paves the way for our expansion into North America, right? So we're very excited about the North American market. Yes, you know, the Chinese market is huge. We're talking about 110 plus million small and micro businesses that can use our service, but the North American market is very, very attractive for us as well. There is a data element that we're going to introduce that's going to create a new revenue stream for the company. We're very excited about that. And in terms of revenue, we have not yet, we don't have enough visibility. I mean, Kubler's got their own forecast, right? It's a private company. So I think it's very important for people to understand that the forecast that we put out earlier this month, when did we put out our forecast? Is it June or this? Anyway, what the forecast that we put out a couple of weeks ago, those forecasts,
July 20th, I think you put
July 20th. Okay, all right. So those forecasts do not include anything about North America, right? So once we get into North America, once we have more visibility into Kubler's operations and what Kubler's forecasting in terms of revenue with the acquisition, then we will have to revise those forecasts to account for the fact that now Peak and Kubler are now a merged entity. So there will be revised forecasts, but at the top of the show, George, we're talking about, like, you know, are the forecasts, you think, too aggressive or whatever? Like, are you confident? We will likely revise the forecast, but it won't be down. Like, I mean, they won't be revised downwards. They'll probably be revised upwards once we have more visibility into Kubler.
Man, it's really amazing to be sitting here talking today about, you know, $620 million in revenue as guidance, and potentially going into the B's, right? Potentially going to the billions, considering where you started and, you know, how you shifted gears a couple of years ago. But that is what's so great about technology companies today. We've said this, it's been a central thesis at Agoracom that small cap companies are going to create more wealth. Small cap technology companies are going to create more wealth this decade than the last 3 decades combined, because AI that you wouldn't have had access to 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, you wouldn't have had it, or you would have had to pay tens of millions of dollars for it. Just would have been impractical. Now you have the opportunity to integrate into your business, license it, acquire it, do all the things you want to do, and create and compete with anybody. So it's amazing to watch, and I don't doubt that you guys are going to be able to get to those numbers and maybe even exceed them based on your new forecasted guidance after Kubler. But how do you want to? There's so much more to talk about, but how do you want to end this interview? What do you want your shareholders to know beyond the obvious about things going great? You're oversubscribed. Find it. Your balance sheet's fantastic. Your income statement's fantastic. What else do you want shareholders to know as we wind up into the NASDAQ listing?
Honestly, George, I would tell our shareholders basically just enjoy the ride with us. Like, I mean, we're having a lot of fun here. The future is bright in this company. You know, there are doubters out there. There are always going to be doubters or whatever. So I know the numbers look like, you know, like some people are saying they look ridiculous or whatever, but you know what? Like, we stand by our numbers and just enjoy the ride with us as we come out with our numbers quarter after quarter. I mean, everybody will see that, you know, what we've been talking about is real, and it's just going to be a lot of fun. We expect to have a lot of fun here executing our business plan. We have a great team, great support right now. We're looking to expand into these different regions of the world. And again, just enjoy the ride. We certainly are.
Well, look, you're not the first small cap explosive growth company to have some doubters along the way. Just ask Jeff Bezos, just ask Elon Musk. You know, there are a lot of doubters along the way as well. and look where they've gotten to. So I wouldn't worry about the doubters. I think you got more. I think you got several multiple more followers and fans out there, and we're one of them. Congratulations on where you gotten to today. Just the numbers today are fantastic, and can't wait to speak to you. Looks like once, maybe twice in August, and can't wait.
Looking forward to it, George. Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun, man.
Always, JJ. Always.
Okay.
Everybody at home, you've been watching or have been listening by podcast on Spotify, Google, Apple, your favorite podcast platform. To Johnson Joseph, CEO of Peak Fintech Group. For now, trades on the CSE and the stock symbol PKK, and for now, trades on the OTCQX under PKKFF. For those who are new to the story, because you're seeing a lot of these headlines, and especially if you saw that guidance that came out earlier this month, and probably wondering, who are these guys? Two ways to do your due diligence. First, get to the Agoracom profile for Peak Fintech. We know there's a lot going on here. It's a different kind of business model. So we've got it all laid out for you in layman's terms to really get that 10,000 that 10,000 foot view of the company. And then to do your deep dive due diligence, you can see it right above JJ, peakfintechgroup.com, or you can link there from Agoracom to do your deep dive. They're on their way to the NASDAQ. They just got $52 million in funding, oversubscribed. There are a lot of people who have confidence in the company. You have to make your decision as to how much confidence you have in them. Just don't tell us 12 months from now we didn't tell you so. Have a great day. See you next time. Hey guys, this video is over, but don't forget to help your company by liking it and even leaving a comment below. And then don't forget to help yourself by subscribing to our channel and never missing another great Agoracom small cap video.